everybody, and welcome to an all-new episode of Press YYZ. We're the only Canadian gaming podcast you can catch live on Twitch every Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST, as well as on podcast services and YouTube every Thursday. My name is Alexander Kazina, and I'm joined today by a fellow co-host that hopefully won't be muted when he speaks on account of my audio settings on my computer being messed up. Hello, AJ.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can see the audio waveforms confirming that they should be able to hear you. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that's a yes. It's a yes.
Okay.
It's a yes. I said that in a very aggressive, concerning manner, but all that to say, I think that everything is okay.
I will say that, you know, we are facing some audio difficulties right now with your audio.
Yeah.
Even though you've changed nothing, you are still peaking a bit even on stream. So I don't know. Maybe push it away from you so it doesn't do that or something, but audio is stupid. Why is it so why is our computer so dumb that you can change literally nothing and everything breaks?
What's annoying, right, is I spent quite a bit of time like wrapping my head around how programs like Voicemeeter worked, for example, to kind of like split up my audio into all sorts of various different sources and inputs and outputs. And I figured, you know, after I kind of overcame that hump, that it was more or less going to be smooth sailing from there. But somehow, like, things still keep getting messed up. Now, it might also maybe be time for me to invest in a new microphone too. This microphone, I mean, it's not in bad shape necessarily. It's not like I'm in immediate need for an improvement, but you know, I've been doing the podcasting game for a little while now, and maybe it's time for me to look at not like a super high-end next step, but like the midway step between the two. And maybe something with maybe consider even investing in something like an actual like physical like audio mixer that I can use with it. Don't think it's something that I would actually go out and buy like right away, but you know, things to keep in mind.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. Before we get started, a reminder as always that we here at Press YYZ stand against discrimination of any kind. While we appreciate however you choose to give back to our show, there is no better way to support us than by being excellent to each other. It's just the two of us today, AJ, as is readily apparent from the fact that there's just the two of us right here on screen. You know, Nathan, Mitch, and Alex Ballant, our film baby, are all off busy doing their own things in their own lives, which means that it's just the two of us to ourselves. And I figured that it would be a good opportunity with the two of us here alone for us to do another one of those kind of rounds of questions that Nathan previously would do on his own one-on-one episodes. But we talked about it a little bit before the show, and we kind of agreed that we should kind of touch base a little bit beforehand, because the two of us actually have some pretty exciting things to talk about before we kind of get into the swing of things.
Yep.
Not a whole lot, but more than I think either of us were expecting. So,
I mean, we also did have an election this week, so
that's a good point. You know, I didn't even think about that, to be honest.
Wow, that wasn't even part of it.
Well, here's the thing. Last night, when the election was ongoing, not last night, Jesus, well, that shows how little I actually remember about it. The night before, on Monday night, I did my cooking stream that night, and I did let people know during the stream, like, hey, you should go out and vote. Like, I wasn't like, hey, you should watch my stream in place of voting. You should, you know, totally take your phone in the car and just watch the cooking stream on the way. But, like, you know, it wasn't really on my mind because I did my voting a week in advance, so.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Let's start things right off, AJ. You said that you had something that you wanted to show me, something physical, something in the room with you.
Oh, yeah.
That isn't your headphones, your chair.
Ready to get physical on this podcast.
Oh, dear. What is this?
So, last weekend, I helped out some family friends of Rachel's parents with a garage sale.
If you don't mind me asking, how do those work in the year 2021?
if people walk into your driveway, it is not entirely enforced, but you hope people will bring masks and wear them. And 99% of the people did. Some people didn't because they were outside, but anytime we had to interact with strangers, everybody was masked up. So,
all right.
Yeah,
all right.
And then you try not to overly touch. They try not to overly touch too many things and whatnot. But it is what it is. But so I was helping out with a yard sale, garage sale, whatever you want to call it, and I got to talking to these people, and just talk. I like yard sales and garage sales and stuff. It's, some of the old treasures that you can find there. Right now, they were selling some stuff that they don't need anymore. That was like their parents or whatever. And
so like their parents,
they were selling their parents at this sale. They were done with they just had no room for them anymore, so they made space. Like it's old glassware that they used to have, old dishes and cutlery, fancy china, that sort of thing. And I got to talking to one of them, and they were I was letting them know that I like garage sales, and because you never know what you're going to find, but also there's sometimes like some really cool old tech at them. You could find like an old Polaroid camera or something like that. And me being interested in video games, I like to look for old video games. Now, this thing wasn't for sale, but this thing was given to me, not necessarily as payment, but because, hey, we don't play this thing anymore. And it could use a good home, and that's this thing right here.
Oh, look at that!
An Atari 400, and it still works and everything. It came with Missile Command, and it came with Space Invaders. A couple of books.
So to be clear, just 100% clear, an Atari 2400, not a 2600. Because I feel like more people...
An Atari 400.
400. Oops. Yeah, my mistake. Because I feel like if anybody listening to our podcast is familiar with Atari, they might be more familiar with the 2600 video game console that was...
Well, that's the thing. When they were telling me they had this, I was expecting your classic Atari 2600 or something. Oh, yeah, we used to play the old Atari and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, wait a minute. This is a really old Atari. And so, it came with a handful of books and manuals and stuff. And like, there's a cartridge where you can code in BASIC on it. And like, it's not going to save anything, but you could theoretically code some sort of, I don't know, like translation tool or something like that. Something small, something simple, whatever. And this instruction manual basically tells you how to do math with like, it was like the for people who had not had some sort of electronic keyboard, this thing has one built into it, and it's just kind of like it's not like a proper keyboard. That was the Atari 800. Atari 400 only has this flat surface with buttons that you can kind of press in. So it wasn't quite the same. It's a little harder to type on, but it's still cool nonetheless. And old tech like that, like especially video game hardware and stuff, I think is really, really cool.
If you don't mind me asking, what's the oldest like piece of like video game or like video game adjacent technology that you own?
Currently, this thing.
All right.
Yeah. It's definitely this thing. This Atari 400.
I think that in my case, the oldest thing that I own is a copy of E.T. for the Atari 2600 that I got at a Montreal Comic-Con. I might have talked about this. In fact, I'm pretty certain I might have shown this off on the podcast in the past. I feel like I did that. It was a really like ratty, like the cartridge cartridge itself is totally fine, but the box that it was in was really ratty, which is how I was able to get the game at a bargain. And it was to be honest, it was a pretty entertaining read because, of course, video games back in the day come up with really elaborate manuals, and for everything that is wrong about that particular game, they really put a lot of effort into making that manual as colorful and as interesting as they possibly could. So
old manuals are a lost art form, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can't remember the last game that I bought that was like a physical version of the game, but I distinctly don't remember seeing much in the way of manuals in it either. Yeah, actually, the next physical game I'm going to be picking up is going to be Metroid not Samus Returns, Metroid Dread. So I'll definitely check then to see if that has a manual, but something gives me a feeling it won't.
Yeah, probably not.
Speaking of which, I bring up Metroid Dread. I hope you don't mind me shifting gears over to my current home situation. I know that, we discussed beforehand that...
Another interest of mine is outer space, so... All
right, there we go.
Dread fits right in.
Works out perfectly. I'm glad you don't mind me stealing the spotlight away from you.
Go for it.
Yeah, at long last, I finally took down Metroid Samus Returns. As previously discussed, I started that game up a little bit ago, before they even announced Metroid Dread, so I was sort of prescient in that regard. I wasn't even realizing, didn't even realize at the time that I was preparing for Metroid Dread got announced, and I was like, all right, now I really have to finish this game. Finally, after like an intense weekend of playing, I got it done and under my belt. It's a really good game, but I will admit that, late into the game, I really kind of was realizing how kind of fatigued I was getting by the fact that, like, oh man, as solid as this game feels, it's probably not going to feel quite as good as Metroid Dread is going to feel, and that definitely made, I don't want to say that it made the last third of the game into a slog, but as close as you can get to a slog in a really polished, Nintendo approved Metroid game, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to activate spoiler modes for this, so kiddies, hold on to your butts. We're activating spoiler mode. I do actually want to give a huge shout out to a very kind of late game reveal that happens in Metroid Samus Returns, which is that over the course of the game, sorry, just checking on a notification real quick, nothing of importance. Over the course of Metroid Samus Returns, there are these sort of floating crystals that you can come across in the environment that kind of block progression into certain siphoned off and hidden areas and power-ups. And throughout much of the adventure, I'm thinking, well, this is a Metroid game. It's only inevitable before we eventually obtain the ability that will allow Samus Aran to access these areas. Maybe this is somehow tied to the ice beam that Samus is going to get, or maybe it's a grapple beam, or maybe it's like a really advanced late game ability like the Shine Spark, which is where Samus does her continuous midair somersaults. However, I didn't obtain a single item that allowed me to get past these floating crystals until at the very end of the game, Samus Aran encounters a Metroid hatchling, and taking pity on it, Samus Aran decides, you know what? Instead of killing this Metroid hatchling like all of the other Metroids in this particular game, I'm going to spare its life, and I am going to turn it over to the galactic research community so that they can use its powers for life-saving purposes. This is how the original version of Samus Returns, Metroid 2: The Return of Samus on the Game Boy ended, but Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS actually goes a step further. Not only does Samus save the Metroid, but it's actually revealed that those little floating crystals that you can see throughout the game are actually food that the baby Metroid feeds on. And after you complete the very, very final last end of the game boss, you can basically go back and re-explore all of the prior areas of the game with the baby Metroid in tow. And I just thought it was like such a like kind of clever, kind of brilliant little way to kind of do that. Again, it kind of played on my expectations. I'm expecting, okay, the way that I'll be able to get past this obstacle is through some sort of new ability, some sort of new weapon, and to kind of flip the script on it and be like, oh no, it's actually a friend that's going to help you.
It's actually the friends you made along the way.
Yeah, it literally is the friends that you made along the way. And it is the thing where, like, you know, in the Metroid lore, Samus is pretty heartbroken when, spoilers, the baby Metroid eventually dies later on down the road. I know. Spoilers for a, like, 20-year-old plot twist. And, yeah, it was just... I appreciated this segment because, yeah, it kind of really kind of hammered home that, you know, this is a creature that Samus, you know, had a, you know, small but burgeoning little relationship with, and it would make sense that you would, you know, be grieving over its eventual death many years later. So, yeah, I thought that was a really cool, pleasant little kind of last minute surprise in that game.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. The last Metroid game that I really played was Fusion way back in the day. Well, I tried to play Other M, didn't make it through that and whatnot, but I've always had like kind of a passing interest in Metroid and stuff like that.
How many of the Metroids have you played?
I tried to make my way through the original back, actually on the Wii, not on the Nintendo, but when it came out on the Wii, I bought it there, on the Virtual Console. And then I played a little bit of Zero Mission, which was basically the same game, but
yeah,
better graphics, right?
Yeah, better everything.
Better everything. And then, but yeah, Fusion was my first real Metroid experience and kind of my last. I did play through a good chunk of Metroid Prime, but I got to a certain point where I could not. There was some boss or whatever that I could not figure out how to beat for whatever reason, and I just didn't care enough to look it up, and so I stopped playing. But I feel like going back to something like that today, if I wanted to, like I could figure that out.
If you don't mind me asking, like, I'm curious what it is that drew you to play Metroid Other M when that game came out, because, like, you know, Metroid Other M, you know, famously did not like sell all that well. Most of the people that played it were kind of Metroid fans that were already kind of ride or die for the franchise. Was it a thing where you had been wanting like more of a narrative focused experience, and you saw Metroid Other M with its, you know, kind of glossy cutscenes for its time, and were like, okay, this is something a little bit more that I think I'm going to vibe with?
No. So I like I said, I've always had a bit of a passing interest in Metroid, right? And I've always liked the main staple of franchises that Nintendo has, and like, you know, you've got Mario, you've got Zelda. Somewhere down the line there, you got Pokemon, you got all that fun stuff. Somewhere down the line there, you get to Metroid eventually, right? And you know, Metroid's fairly high up there considering. But I've just always had a passing interest in Nintendo's games and stuff. And so with Other M, when that was coming out, it was like, okay, a new Metroid game. This one sounds like this is a prequel. Well, you know what? I'll give it a shot, whatever. And then it was something else, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I can barely remember like too much about it. Like I remember it having those weird, awkward, like you could zoom in and suddenly it's first person, and you had to aim with the Wii remote, and it wasn't very good doing that. And then you had to go back, and it was like part side scroller, part not. It was interesting, but not exactly well executed.
Yeah, it was a pretty experimental game, all things considered, in many different regards and many different layers. Yeah, it's a little bit surprising for me, because I feel like like Metroid Other M, certainly not the worst game in the world. People that compare it to like the Legend of Zelda CDI games have definitely not played the CDI games for comparison. But it's like I would never recommend Metroid Other M as like someone's, you know, first or second Metroid game. I would be like, hey, play all the other like mainline games, and if you really are kind of like interested in this franchise and you really kind of you want to explore everything that it has to offer, you know, give it a shot. And, you know, if you don't enjoy it, well, that's totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the subject of space, AJ.
Go on.
There's another video game that I also managed to beat ahead of today's podcast.
Did you finish fighting in this game by any chance?
You could say that. You could also say that I finished barely struggling to get off of an exploding ring inside of a vehicle. I finished
Halo 3.
And unbelievably, if you can believe it, there were like no difficulties along the way. Somehow I just managed to get through that game with not a single scratch, nothing whatsoever. It was truly.
I don't know if you know this. It might be too late. But when you're jumping with the Warthog, there is a little bit of aftertouch you can apply in midair, so you don't have to nosedive right down. Just the slightest bit of after. Maybe it's too late.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit too late. I will say I led by showing, you know, one of the more disastrous clips from the stream that I did last night. But truthfully, most of my time with Halo 3 was pretty smooth going. I don't really know where this game lands in my placement overall of the series. I feel like this game undoubtedly had some of the most polished and slickest gameplay of the entire trilogy, but I do think that the level design in Halo 2 was just a little bit kind of more creative and a little bit more out there. But at the same time, I also do have to give the nod to Halo 3 for having some of the most kind of epic, wide-scale set pieces of the entire series, such as the kind of first chapter where you land on the Ark, for example. So, yeah.
So overall, you are you understanding why people like it?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, mind you, I've not really, you know, played a whole lot of the multiplayer, which is definitely a kind of big component of it. It's I definitely the entire time playing through this game, I'm like, I can definitely see how Halo fans who, you know, grew up with Halo 1 and Halo 2 were definitely incredibly hyped for this game, and I can totally see how they definitely felt like their expectations were met, because I can totally see, like, you know, everything that I enjoyed about Halo 1 and Halo 2 kind of coming together really well. I will say this, and I did talk about this on stream. I wasn't a super huge fan of a couple of the characters that met their untimely ends at the very end of this game. I don't know if you want me to activate spoiler mode, if you consider it.
Go for it.
Sure.
Because there's going to be people playing through Halo for the first time this year, trying to catch up, or the first time in a long time, and they may have forgotten. So
so at the very end of Halo 3, both Sergeant Johnson, who we see on screen right here but who does not die in this scene, and another character who we're about to see and who does die in this scene, meet their end. Sorry, I feel bad forgetting her name, considering she's a
Miranda Keyes.
Feel bad forgetting her name, considering she's, you know, a pretty powerful, capable female character in this game. But like I said, pretty new to Halo. I don't know. I kind of felt like both of their deaths felt like they were felt like they happened in the game to kind of create a kind of like drama more than they felt there to kind of like really kind of serve kind
propel
of
the story.
Yeah, really kind of propel the story kind of forward. It kind of, I don't know, I was reminded of like early deaths in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like Agent Coulson, for example, where it's like, I don't necessarily feel like you needed to do that. And I feel like these characters were, pretty cool characters that I'd come to really love over the course of the past 2 games. And it's disappointing knowing that we won't really kind of get to see them going forward, excluding, prequel appearances, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, what difficulty are you playing on?
I'm playing on normal.
You're playing on normal? Yeah. So I played through on normal earlier this year as well. In the legendary cutscenes, you get a little backstory when it's only really the final cutscene, like post-credit scene or whatever. Usually, but in the first one, in the first game, you see Sergeant Johnson on the Halo, and he hugs an elite because hey, they know that this is it; they're gonna die, and then Sergeant Johnson, you just see the Pillar of Autumn explode on the first Halo, and like a nuke going off, everything goes white. And so it's really become in Halo 2, it's classified how he got off the ring, but you see him die, but it's a whole thing. And fun fact, technically, so Master Chief is a Spartan 2, right? Second generation of Spartans. Sergeant Johnson is technically a Spartan 1. That's why he is so that it's technically why he is so
resilient.
Resilient, that's the word. When it comes to,
and it ties into why he wasn't taken by the flood in the first game too. Correct? I think so. But actually, in the lore of it, there's like secret protocols and everything that they have in case a Spartan actually does get infected by the flood, and they essentially have to like glass their own planet if that happens or something like that. It's a whole Jesus.
A whole thing. Because Spartans are genetically enhanced super soldiers, so they have to contain it. Because they'll be more powerful than any normal flood or even a flood brute. So, but Halo's got good story, but I totally understand what you're saying with some of those deaths being like kind of out of nowhere and for the sake of killing them. Those deaths were kind of like annoying. I kind of would have liked to see one, if not both of them, survive a little bit longer or whatever. But actually, at least one of the multiplayer maps in the Halo Infinite. Set to be coming out, which you should have access to, I think, if you signed up for the Insider program.
I did not.
Okay. Well, you won't be able to play it then. That's fine. It's up again this weekend and the weekend after. Fun fact. But there's a map centered around a training academy for new Spartans. And it's named after Sergeant Avery Johnson. So
got it.
So he does get honored fairly well in the lore going forward. It's just, it wasn't particularly well handled how they just chose to get rid of him, or even Miranda. This was supposed to like finish the fight, but they were not done making Halo games at the time, and so. I guess, I don't know. They wanted some finality, but there can be finality without murder.
Yeah. I do also, I will say, though, on the other hand, I do want to give a pretty big shout out to the Arbiter's kind of role in this game. Well, while it is slightly disappointing that you don't get to control him this time around, I did love every single moment that he kind of played a part in. One moment that I appreciated, where we didn't even get to kind of see Arbiter on screen, but that I really loved, is I think in the third to last chapter of the game, like Chief, Arbiter, and Johnson have to basically lower the defenses around the tower where the Prophet of Truth are stating. And it's like, all right, you guys have to all do this at the same time. You know, Chief gets to the top of his tower. He deactivates the defenses. All right, you deactivated your defenses. Now, Arbiter should deactivate his as well. And like right on cue, Arbiter deactivates his. And it's like, what a fun little moment of like, oh yeah, Arbiter is like right on the same level as you are. So big shout out to that. I do want to talk a little bit about what my next steps are in the Halo series, because I absolutely do want to play ODST next, going off of the, order in which these games came out. But what I want to know is, do you think that it would be worth playing ODST on stream? And I should say, for the record, I think that next week I'm going to be taking a break, both so that I can just focus on some other projects and also just to kind of decompress from the conclusion of Halo 3. So there is time for the two of us to kind of figure out what is best for our streaming efforts going forward. So we don't need to arrive at a conclusive decision right here and right now. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. ODST is... So it's a side story, and it's set technically in the middle of Halo 2, right? The point in Halo 2 where they the slip space rupture happens on Earth, and the Covenant ship enters warp on the planet. It's like right as that is happening, and the Chief and Miranda's Pelican just barely make it into that,
right? Just
as they're escaping, right? It's just as that's happening, and there's these ODSTs falling to the ground, trying to get. They didn't know that they were about to disappear, but there's still residual Covenant forces in the city in New Mombasa. Whether or not you should play it on stream, I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to get your perspective on it at the very least.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm definitely gonna talk about it after I beat it on the podcast. No doubt about that.
If you can use the stream to guarantee yourself time to actually play it, then absolutely. I think using the streams as potentially focusing on the mainline 1 through 5 before Infinite comes out would be good. But also, I think we need to see you go through Halo Reach as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. You say that I should only use the stream to focus on 1 through 5, but there are many people that would say that Reach is, right up there with the mainline games in terms of quality and, great storytelling and whatnot.
ODST, well, a very fantastic story, very fantastic music and everything, very interesting concept and idea, is definitely a side venture compared to everything, and because you're not playing as a Spartan, you're playing as an ODST, orbital drop shock trooper. So not even genetically enhanced. You're playing as SEAL Team 6 essentially, as they drop into the war zone. But it's definitely more of, it feels more like a mod of Halo 3, where Halo Reach feels like the next Halo game. if that makes sense. Plus, Reach fits into the story much like how Star Wars Rogue One fits into the Star Wars story.
Mm-hmm.
It's positioned almost exactly like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, do what you will with that information.
Mm. All right. Well, I certainly have time to think about it. That much is certain.
Yeah.
I've spent the past little while talking about 2 games that I've been playing. AJ, is there anything else that you have been playing that you want to talk about before we head into our topic of the show this week? Which is also going to be about you, so you don't need to worry about you not talking in a bit.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's fair. I've been playing more No Man's Sky, but I'm starting to finally kind of peter out on that, and I'm trying to find something else to play. Hopefully, well, I'm gonna be playing a lot of the new Halo Infinite test flight this weekend when that happens. Hopefully, it seems like they're actually sticking to the scheduled stress test times this time, as opposed to letting it run the whole time and then people can play whenever. So I gotta figure that out and try and schedule that. But other than that, nothing at the moment. Yeah.
Nothing at the moment. All right, then. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump into our topic of the show this week, which is going to be the string of questions that we've previously asked each other on our prior one-on-one episodes. AJ, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, what is your favorite game of all time?
Oh boy.
And does it begin with a H?
No. I don't know. I don't think it does. I gotta, you have to kind of think back a little, okay. Overall, my 2 favorite franchises, the ones that I look back upon the most with adoration, if you will, is one of them is Halo, and then the other is Zelda. I think if I were to pick a favorite game, yes, I probably played a hell of a lot more Halo than I have Zelda, but Halo being having such a robust multiplayer is kind of built for that, and it became kind of a party fun co-op thing or whatever. But I think the Wind Waker might actually be one of my favorite games of all time, if not the. It came out in 2003 when I turned 13, and while the main character was of Link in that one was a bit younger technically, there was definitely a good, here's a kid at a weird in-between age, doesn't know what he is or supposed to be, and totally kind of came to his own on this adventure, first of all to go find his sister, and then second to really save the world. And there was something absolutely magical about the Wind Waker at that time when that first came out.
I'm curious, were you a Zelda fan that was paying attention to a lot of the online discourse that was happening at the time leading up to the Wind Waker's release? Did you have any hard thoughts or opinions about it before you actually got your hands on it?
Yeah, I was upset that we saw the Space World demo of those realistic looking GameCube graphics, and then we got Wind Waker. Or we're going to get Wind Waker. I was like, what's going? What? why are we not making this like a little more realistic or something, right? It didn't quite make sense to me why that would happen. But then you play it, and it probably remains the one game that actually kind of holds up the best out of all of them. Just because of the art style decisions alone, right?
Right.
Yeah, that now I absolutely love it. The way it looks and the way Link's facial expressions happen and everything. There's just something perfect about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to look back at the first reveal trailer for the Wind Waker, because this trailer definitely leans into the campy goofiness of the game, which, like, it's not that the trailer is being dishonest. There is a lot of goofiness in the Wind Waker, and that's totally okay. But anybody who's played the Wind Waker can tell you that, the game, not that the game is, particularly serious, but the game definitely, has its moments of seriousness, its moments where, you do kind of really kind of feel for characters' pathos and the kind of situations that they found themselves in, particularly Ganondorf, for example. And I like obviously, it's looking back in retrospect, it's embarrassing how much vitriol was directed at Wind Waker in the lead up to its release, but I can also slightly sympathize with people who saw that first reveal trailer and were like, this feels like it's leaning a little bit too heavily into Looney Tunes.
Well, yeah, especially after Ocarina of Time and especially after Majora's Mask. Like, well, what do you do next with more powerful hardware? Well, you should keep going in that direction, right? And it's just like, yes, right? And they eventually got there with Twilight Princess towards the end of at the end of the GameCube's lifespan and the beginning of the Wii. But then, you look back and graphically, the Wind Waker still holds up. So it's like, yeah, it's still super, super cool. And I think it came out at the right time for me to have some sort of emotional connection to not only to it, but just to a piece of media in general. So
very, very cool. All right, let's move on to question number 2. What or who got you into video games in the first place?
So I remember kind of asking this question on a previous podcast a lot, probably last year at some point.
Sure.
Where I asked you guys what your very first gaming memory was, and I can't remember what you guys said, but mine was my dad showing me in the very first Super Mario where the secret mushroom is in World 1-1 at the very kind of beginning there. There's that hidden block that you can't see anything of, and you just jump in the right spot and you get an extra life. That is my answer.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty cool way to get into games. Yeah, trust me when I say that. Yeah, my parents definitely did not show me video games. Video games kind of found me.
Yeah, that's what kicked it all off and made games like a valuable pastime for me. But I guess you could say it wasn't necessarily until Pokemon on the Game Boy, which really got me hooked and obsessed in the idea of gaming.
Right. Let's move on to question number 3. What's a game you thought you'd like, but actually hated?
Whoa, okay.
We're getting the more and more we go on, the more and more intense we're getting. Yeah, so you better buckle up.
Oh boy. Okay, so I have one distinct memory where I raged at a game really, really hard. And like I had my controller in my hand and I slammed it on the floor. It busted open on the side. It still worked. It's still functional. But it was the game based on the first Transformers movie. Yeah.
Do you remember for what console this was? Because infamously, if I recall correctly, there were actually not a lot of Transformers games on the original NES, which is when that movie came out.
Yeah. It was on the 360.
360.
Actually.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a boss fight. There were two paths. Two.
Oh, hold on a second. Story. Are you talking about the 2007 2007 movie?
Yes.
Oh, got it.
That's what I mean by first Transformers movie.
I thought you were referring to the
live action Transformers.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Yep. That's the one. The Shia LaBeouf ones. Yeah, I thought I would enjoy it at the very least because at the time I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was fine. Whatever. And so I got to there were two not paths. There were two stories in it, an Autobot story and a Decepticon story. And I got all the way through the Autobot story, and there's like a final boss fight with Megatron. And he was so friggin' cheap that like there was a very, very specific, it was how it passed quality testing. I have no fucking idea, but I'm pissed off just thinking about it because it just I do everything fucking correct, but if I was like off by a pixel in my placement of the character, fuck it was. Fuck this game.
Man, do you remember? Yeah, I'm just in general like there's part of me that I don't miss, but I am weirdly nostalgic for that era where they would make AAA-ish games based on the blockbuster of the week. And
yeah,
now we just don't get that anymore.
Well, yeah, because they were always terrible. And here I was taking a chance on one. And
oh, man. Did you see the way that Bumblebee turned into that car? Hold on. I'm going to just rewind that just a quick second.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the transforming is kind of like part of the
hold on a sec. Damn it. I think I rewound.
It's almost there.
Whatever. It's fine. Theater of the mind. Fine. Just in your mind's eye, imagine Bumblebee transforming into a car in a very unglamorous fashion that was very much not like the way that he transformed into a car in the movie. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Regardless. Yeah. It was not a good game. Which, based on being a movie game in the mid to late 2000s, anybody could have told you that was going to happen. But I took a chance on it, and I regretted it.
Oh, well, I mean, it's definitely happened to all of us. Continuing in our trend of, digging up bad memories, hot, heated emotions. Question number 4. What's a really popular game that everyone seems to love, but that you don't like?
Currently, Fortnite.
I'm not going to lie. I think that Fortnite was my answer as well.
Yeah, I remember it was the new hotness. My friend Ben and my friend Taylor tried to get together in a team, and we tried to play it. We played a couple rounds, and I was just like, this doesn't feel good. I don't don't like this, right? And then, you know, I try to watch like some streamers play it and everything, and then suddenly all it became at the time was, okay, who can build the highest tower at this point? And like as soon as you start getting shots, suddenly somebody's surrounded by walls, and it's just like, I understand that there's like a different interesting kind of take and a new tactic there, even just on a third person shooter perspective, but like when every match would just end in a sniper fight between two people trying to build towers and take pot shots at their other tower, and like there were no physics on these towers, it just got incredibly boring. Like I preferred PUBG, because like, yeah, it was a lot slower paced, but there was something about PUBG that felt like horror movie, where Fortnite just felt like getting shot, fucking build a tower.
I definitely talked about this on my own one-on-one episode, so I'll keep this brief. But Fortnite has always been super weird to me, where aesthetically you'd think that it would be the game with the lower skill ceiling, the game that's easier to get into and there's not as much to master, but it's like just as kind of technically demanding as any of the other battle royale games out there, if not more so. Whereas I feel like something like you said PUBG or Apex Legends, which I haven't played in a little while, but long time listeners of the podcast will know I was infatuated with last year. Those are games that kind of look like they are as technically demanding as they actually are, and I've always kind of appreciated that about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's, for me, like, I love Minecraft, but the building in Fortnite just turns me right off. Not for me.
Question number 5 is switching gears to more pleasant memories. What's a game you didn't expect to enjoy but ended up liking?
That's oh, you know what? Mass Effect. At the time, my ADHD was a little understimulated, right? And I needed something with a bit more action right off the front, less talky, more dewy, if you will. And Mass Effect was very, very story driven. And so I played through a couple hours of it, and I was just not in the mood for it. I came back to it like 6 months later, because I spent all this money on this. I spent $80 on this game. I better at least try to see it to the end, give it a real shot. And then that's when it kind of clicked with me. It was like suddenly it was a right place, right time. So yeah, Mass Effect.
Well, I'm happy that you came back to it. I feel like it's rare for any of us to like get a game, not really enjoy it, or not even really play it, and then kind of come back to it and really get into it after not expecting to do so. Last game that it was like that for me was the original Dark Souls, which I played for like 6 hours, left for 6 months, and then came back to and beat.
Yeah, that's actually another game that a lot of people seem to like that I just cannot. Like, I respect the shit out of like Dark Souls and stuff like that. Even more so than I can respect, like, say, a Fortnite or something like that. But the Souls games are things that just never clicked with me, and I gave them a good fair shake, and it's just like there was something. I wanted to go into it without having to use the internet to guide me. I wanted the game to guide me, and it just didn't feel like the game wanted to give any sort of, like, I got in the original Dark Souls, I got to a certain point where it was like 30 minutes in, like there's the very first tutorial boss where it's very hard to do, but you can technically beat it. Or you're supposed to die to it, but you can beat it if you're good enough. I went into it in the right mindset for Dark Souls. And I actually beat it my first try. And when I got to the main, I guess, hub world or something like that, it was completely directionless. And I had no context for what I should be doing. And it was just, I could not progress. So yeah.
Totally understandable. Totally understandable. We're going to go ahead and we're going to jump to question number 8. Have you ever pretended to be sick to get out of something so that you could play a game?
Pretended to be sick. I mean, there were a couple days in like elementary school, maybe middle school, where I just could not emotionally be there. And so I said that I wasn't feeling well, and I had a grandparent come pick me up. And I spent the day with them and just played my Game Boy for the rest of the day or whatever. Just there, it was like I had a bad case of the Mondays or something like that and couldn't handle it. But I will. I'm not pretending to be sick, but this year I have booked off the day of and the days after in that week of Halo Infinite's release. So yeah, I'm doing that on purpose because I'm an adult and I can make those decisions.
Totally, definitely understandable. I don't know if I've specifically done what you're describing yourself at like a professional like job capacity, but obviously I've definitely done the staying home from sick to play a video game thing a couple times. Yeah. Not too much. Yeah. I wasn't that much of a ditcher when it came to school.
Yeah, same. Like I in high school, there was one year I didn't have a single late or a single absence. So like that's not who I was. It was just at a certain point I just could not, like, there was a few years there growing up that I just could not be there emotionally. So
Question number 9. What's the origin of your gamer tag?
Yes, quite. So years ago, when a gamer tag was first created by Xbox, but the video game handle or what have you is what it's normally referred to, and it's the one I go by everywhere now, Times Hero. But before Times Hero, when I first created an Xbox Live account, I had the username Xbox Viper with a 0 in the Xbox. And that's, I would use that for almost everything at that point. But then I got kind of tired of the jerks on Xbox especially, just being like, oh well, you like Xbox that much? How stupid's that? It's just a freaking, like, I didn't think too hard about it. So eventually, like, I decided to change it, and with that, I just kind of changed everything to it. But Times Hero came around as the main story behind it is it was just kind of an homage to Zelda, and how Link is the hero of time in Ocarina of Time. So Times Hero, it's technically time 'S hero.
You pulled
hero.
You pulled a Metroid 2 Return of Samus Returns, basically. Basically.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I came to that conclusion. But then later on, it worked out really well that I got really into Doctor Who at a certain point. And I like they were all on like Netflix or something a while ago, and then now they're not. But yeah, I got big into Doctor Who, and that's a big wibbly wobbly timey wimey time travel adventure thing. And he's a time lord, and he's essentially a hero traveling through time. So it all kind of works out.
Yeah. Very cool. In your opinion, this is question number 10. What is the best video game console?
Oh, the best console.
Well, getting a little sleepy in there.
Oh yeah, I'm always sleepy these days. That my whole sarcoidosis thing zaps the energy right out of me some days. I mean, currently on my desk, I've got a GameCube and a Wii. I've got a Game Boy. I've got a wired 360 controller plugged into my PC. I've got the Xbox Series controller. I've got my Vita out here on the desk for some reason. I think I'm somewhere between GameCube and 360 in terms of best console. GameCube came out at a prime time for me and my growing up, and the 360 was basically the console of my teenage years when it came out in 2005, so I was 15. And the GameCube came out in 2001, so I was 11. So that decade and that era, those were my two main console loves, if you will. I don't think I can choose a favorite child in that regard.
I'm curious, you talked about, really enjoying the original Game Boy back in the day. Where do you stand with regards to the Game Boy Advance?
The GBA was a better Game Boy, technically. I had a lot of fun with it. The GameCube that I have here up on the desk actually has the GBA player stuck in the bottom of it.
Do you have the disc as well, though, or just the player?
Yes, I have the disc.
You have the disc.
It's around here somewhere. I have the disc.
Well, never let that one go, because they're not cheap.
I believe it. The GBA is fine, but I didn't have as many. I don't know. Maybe it's like you always remember your first or whatever. And my first Game Boy was the Game Boy Color, and I just have more fondness and affinity for that than I do the GBA. I never had a GBA SP. I had the wide GBA without the backlight. And I've been honestly looking into seeing if I can get a mod for the GBA to put the backlight in to the big one, because those do exist, but they do cost money too, so it's hasn't been a priority for something I'm probably not gonna actually play that much these days. So
right.
But yeah,
I'm going to skip ahead to question number 12 next. Have you ever had to stop playing a game because it was too scary?
Too scary. because it was too scary, no. Like, that's not the reason, but I'm trying to think of, like, scary games that I played. And, like, I played through a good chunk of Resident Evil 4 back in the day. And it was very stressful playing through that, but I didn't end up finishing it, mostly because I got frustrated with the controls more than anything. And the with just how cumbersome the controls were, that made my anxiety playing Resident Evil 4 that much worse. And so I was just like, I just had enough. I did not want to do that anymore. So I didn't. I know I tried to play a little bit of Amnesia back in the day on PC, and that was intense for a bit. I intended to go back to it, and I just never did. But yeah, I can't say I actually stopped playing a game because it got too scary.
All right. Fair enough. Question number 13. Has a game storyline ever made you cry?
I got emotional at the end of Twilight Princess. Because I named the main character after myself, right? It's not Link, it's AJ, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody refers to me. And at the very end of Twilight Princess, when Zelda reaches out and she says, AJ, chosen hero, I got a little teary-eyed at that and was pretty excited about it. But full-on bawl or cry or whatever, no, it's not. It's not something my body lets me do that well, and games don't quite trigger that response for me, or at least they haven't yet.
Sure. All right. We're going to go ahead and skip a little bit ahead because we don't want to spend the whole night here, and I want to really, make sure I can get the hottest scoops out of one AJ times hero. I said AJ times hero like times hero is your last name.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun fact.
What is the longest amount of time that you've sat playing a video game or multiple video games nonstop?
Okay, so I guess we don't count. I mean, we won't count washroom breaks or anything, or are we going to count
washroom breaks? It's like paid lunchtime. Like we can count it if it's not that long.
Yeah. Well, nonstop. Probably I'd probably put a good 8 hours into a few games. I know I tried to play when Halo Reach first came out. I tried to play that in one sitting, and that was as long as like any of the other Halo games that came before it. I could, as a kid and what have you, on like weekends, I would spend a lot of time playing my Game Boy and playing Pokemon specifically, and with like the TV on in the background, and like that's how I would spend my weekend. And the day would be gone, and I was happier than a pig in shit when that would happen. Yeah, so I can't actually I haven't done like a proper like Extra Life 24-hour stream or play something or whatever. But you know, I have done the new game binge it in one sitting, or like do a full day binge. Like last year when The Last of Us 2 came out, I played The Last of Us 1 and The Last of Us 2 back to back. And that was after work. I would come home and put a good 6 hours into it every day, aside from when we, you know, would do the podcast. But in one sitting, I can't quantify it. But it hasn't been as crazy as I know some other people have. Because I also, like I keep saying, sometimes my ADHD gets in the way, and sometimes it's very hard for me to concentrate on something for that long. Like I can hyper focus on something that I'm really interested in, but I can't. It's not an everlasting resource. Does that make sense?
I understand. Even when I have done my Extra Life live streams, which I've done 2 of them, 2 12-hour live streams, I've really kind of tried to vary things up myself. I think the first year it might have been exclusively video games, but the second year I definitely took breaks here and there to do kind of non-video gamey stuff. Like here, I'm going to build this Lego set. Here, I'm going to, you know, make some pizzas, which was kind of the inception for all the Kozi Bears cooking stuff. You definitely, you have to be superhuman to actually do that stuff for like 12 hours or more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Switching gears once again, what is your favorite song from a video game? Now, I feel like you can interpret this question however you want. Maybe it can be like a piece of background music. It can actually be like a song with vocals. It can be whatever it is that particularly comes to mind. Any piece of audio from a video game that made you go, that's a good piece of audio from a video game.
I'm gonna kind of cop out and name a few things.
It's all right.
I'm gonna try and have a good variety. But of course, like, you know, the Halo theme is kind of one that gets me really good. But there's a couple other like tracks in the Halo games that kind of speak to me as well. There's like the rock anthem for Saving the World in the first one. That's one of the ones that I actually know the title of. Drum Run in the first one as well is a really good one. Then you go over to like Zelda or whatever, and Ocarina of Time is just completely full of great music tracks and stuff. I actually used to listen to actually the best song in Ocarina of Time is Last Battle, where at the end of the game, after you escape the castle with Zelda, you have one more surprise fight to kind of get through.
Spoilers.
And that song there. Yeah, spoilers for a game that came out almost 30 years ago. There's that in Ocarina of Time. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, the battle against Red at the very end is a top tier video game sound track music thing.
I thought you were just going to say video game sound, and I'm like, totally,
yeah, the entire sound of it, yeah. Then I remember Burnout 3 had a really killer soundtrack. The opening title song was a song by a band called the F Ups, or the Fuck Ups, if you will. called Lazy Generation. It was a really killer track, but it also on the soundtrack for that, it also opened me up to things like My Chemical Romance. I'm Not Okay, I Promise was on that. Atreyu's Right Side of the Bed was on that. Memory by Sugar Cult, I think, was also on that. I think that's who it was. And like a couple others. 1080 Avalanche had a decent like 12 to 15 song soundtrack, because that's all they could fit, I guess, on the small GameCube discs.
Right.
Where they had a couple of good songs that were really cool to go down the hill on a snowboard with. And then Rock Band kind of solidified my taste in music. Rock Band and Guitar Heroes kind of solidified my taste in music. So
earlier on in the podcast, we talked about video game eras, video game trends that are long gone. Like that was definitely a trend at some point. Video games that featured almost exclusively licensed music that you would play and love, and that would kind of inform you and educate you about other bands and musicians out there that you would also love.
Look at Tony Hawk, right?
Right.
If the Beatles were any good, they would have been in the why aren't they in the Tony Hawk soundtrack? Like, think about it.
And I don't know if that's exactly what I wanted to impart from that, but sure.
No, I was reading between the lines. I know what you were saying.
All right. Have you ever wanted to live in a video game world, AJ? And if so, which one and why?
I feel like I could live maybe not with how it ended. I feel like I could live in the Mass Effect universe. That would be cool.
I mean, we saw that teaser for the next Mass Effect. There are still people hanging around, flying around in their Oblivion spaceships.
I guess we'll see. Yeah, that's complicated, because usually these worlds are facing some sort of impending doom that you consider. If you consider you have to play the main character, if I were in that world, would I still be the main character, or would I be a side character who potentially just gets slaughtered by whatever the hell happens? Who knows?
The Mass Effect example is an interesting one, because something I never realized about the Mass Effect series until I went back and played Mass Effect 1 earlier this year is that it has not been long in the Mass Effect universe by the events of Mass Effect 1 that humanity has been in contact with the rest of the galaxy and has been kind of mingling and coexisting with them, which means that in a scenario where you get to exist in the Mass Effect universe, you could theoretically be there at the very beginning of contact with the Turians and all the other species, but there's a very, very narrow window of time, no matter when you start, where everything's going to be chilling okay. Eventually, either you're in the First Contact War, or you're in the war with the Reapers, or you're experiencing the devastation on the Citadel at the end of the first game. In the middle there's a brief period of time where everything's kind of okay, but it doesn't last.
It doesn't last very long, and it's I don't know. I come from a very privileged upbringing compared to a lot of people in this world, and it's hard to conceptualize not being okay or being put in those scenarios. So
speaking coincidentally of privilege, what's a game you've spent the most amount of money on?
Considering I bought the Legendary Edition of Halo Reach at the same time, I bought the Halo Reach Special Edition console for the 360. It's probably that, because that was probably close to $1,000 total. I think. Because it was like probably $500 for the console, and then for the Legendary Edition, probably $3 to $4. And that's the one that came with the statue of the Noble team on it. It came with other. Actually, the Legendary Edition of Halo Reach came with some really cool, like, lore bending stuff. Like, you haven't touched on it too much in the first trilogy here of Halo, but the Spartan program was essentially created by a scientist by the name of Dr. Catherine Halsey. And, you know, she had a notebook, and they made that notebook and gave it away in the special edition copies of Halo Reach. And it was super cool to see. And there's like special, like, futuristic ID scan badges and stuff to, like, get into Oni and stuff. But yeah, it yeah, I would probably Halo Reach the most, just because I bought the console and the most expensive edition of the game.
All right. What is your favorite villain from a video game, and why?
Favorite villain. I really like what they did with Ganondorf in Twilight Princess specifically. Because he was, like, banished.
I just wanted to say, I thought for a second you were going to lead with talking about Ganon in the Wind Waker.
He's a very good one as well. But I like the overall story of that better than Twilight Princess, but I think as a villain, Ganondorf in Twilight Princess, I just kind of think is cooler. You know, the guy got stabbed in the chest and banished again, and kind of clawed his way out and took over again, in a really cool way. And just the boss fight at the end of Twilight Princess in general. The first part being against his beast form, and you have to dodge him as he's coming out of those portals, and you have to kind of, like, grab onto the horns just before it hits you, and you got to toss him out of the way. And then you get out of the castle, and suddenly you're fighting him on horseback, and swinging your sword around on him as you go. And then the final showdown, and it's just you versus him. They're just trying to hell, even the horseback thing. You had Zelda on the back of the horse shooting him with light, like, just the whole last final boss fight sequence in Twilight Princess is just a lot cooler. Wind Waker, it was a really interesting fight at the end, but very simple and predictable. If that makes sense.
That, I feel like here's the thing. I really enjoyed Ganondorf in Twilight Princess as well. I feel like after Ganondorf and Twilight Princess, though I can't. There are very few Nintendo games that come to mind that had final boss fights that were quite as elaborate and quite as multi-layered as that one. I feel like Nintendo kind of got a little bit spooked by the kind of, again, not necessarily mixed reception to Ganondorf, but the very kind of plotting, meticulous nature of, all right, you have stage 1, and then you have stage 2, and then you have stage 3, and then you have stage 4. And what's funny is that I'm sure that it probably would go by back in a flash if I played through them today, because I feel like my skills as a gamer have leveled up that much. But I feel like people circa 2006 at the time kind of had, they were kind of over it at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
But I still really do respect that opinion.
Yeah.
I'm curious, AJ.
Yeah.
Do you have a deep, dark, dirty, gaming guilty pleasure?
Oh. Guilty pleasure game. I don't know if I have any like guilty pleasures, because I'm like open about all the things that I like to play. And like none of them are inherently like bad, like a Candy Crush or anything like that. Like I'm not interested in those games at all. They don't hold my interest. Yeah, I don't know. There was a time, I guess, where I was more interested in going on eBay and buying 100 digital codes for the Pokemon trading card game on the computer, and then getting a bunch of cards out of those, and then never building a good deck with them, because I don't actually like deck building. I just want to play the game. I don't want to have to like super meta think about it that hard. I just want to play the game and battle with my cards. So I've had some rough moments like that where it can be tough to not spend that, like, and it was like $20 and you'd get a lot of 100 codes for the digital card packs and stuff, and it was like nothing. That's a quick way to accidentally become a whale if that happens. But yeah,
all right,
I can't say there's too much that I actually feel guilty about.
Fair enough. So. All right, we've arrived at the final question of the evening. Would you give up video games for life? And this is, I should point out, typically the final question that we end these one-on-ones with. Would you give up video games for life and receive $100 million in cash? Or would you refuse the money? And I should mention, for those who have been listening to the podcast for a while, I bumped up that cash value by just a little bit, just to make it a little bit more appetizing, because in the past, it's kind of been like, what? No, that amount of money? Nuh-uh.
Yeah. So I'm trying to put myself in a scenario where, okay, let's say I didn't have to give these up, but I suddenly acquired that much money. What would I want to do with that money? And what I would want to do, probably, I'd buy the car of my dreams, the house of my dreams, whatever. But then I'd also probably want to buy a bunch of old video games, because I'm a weirdo like that. So I don't think... I don't think it's possible for me to do that.
I'm assuming, like, Nathan was the one who originally came up with these questions. I'm assuming that Nathan would be okay with you arguing, whoa, hold on. I'm going to buy the video games, but I'm not going to actually play them. I'm going to have them as a video game collector. I'm sure that that's admissible within the rules.
Yes, but I want to be able to play the games that I own. Right? So I'm trying to think, what else do I enjoy doing with my free time? And really, there isn't much, if anything else, that I would rather be doing with that free time. Like, my brain with my ADHD does not enjoy reading. It cannot hyperfocus on reading. Movies are fine passive activity once in a while, and I can get hooked on a show and binge it or whatever. I don't enjoy exercise that much. Theoretically, I could travel, but where do I want to travel to? Somewhere like Japan and go to a Japanese arcade. I want that opportunity. So I think I'm gonna have to say no. And I don't know what. Maybe $1 billion would be like the limit.
That would be the tipping point.
That might be like, if you got me a solid B on there, perhaps I could find a way to manage.
If I was I was going to say, if I was the person, overseeing this exchange of money and video game time, I would still allow you to, appear on podcasts and talk about video games. I would not allow you to have No Man's Sky as your background. That would be unadmissible, but everything else would be okay.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You can't... that's the thing... That is my hobby of choice, my passion of my entertainment passion is the interactive entertainment experience. And so it's a really tough one. And I think if you got a solid B on there, then I could probably find other ways. But just 100 million, I mean, I could, with 100 million, I'd be fine for the rest of my life, but I could theoretically, I don't know. There would be video game things that I'd want to do with that money. With $1 billion, then you know what? I'm gonna probably invest in SpaceX and be on the next ticket out to space. So, I don't know.
All right. Well, that's fair enough. Ladies and gentlemen, it would appear that we have arrived at the end of today's installment of Press YYZ. We did it! Hey! Clap yourself on the back and pat your hands, as they say. Whoops, might have gotten that reversed. If you enjoyed this broadcast, be sure to follow us on Twitch, subscribe to us on YouTube, and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. You can also check us out on Twitter at PressYYZ and slide into our Discord at invite.gg/PressYYZ to keep the conversation going. Until next time, I'm Alexander Kazina. This is AJ going off at light speed or warp speed or slip speed or whatever they call it in No Man's Sky. And we want to thank you for playing.
Adios!